When we really thought about it, we came to a pretty simple conclusion that an HTML5 player is not so different than your favorite burger. The analogy actually works really well because HTML5 has offered a much more flexible framework, and we're getting further and further away from kind of the black box Flash type technologies and into a world where if you can imagine it, you can most likely build it. So what exactly is involved in an HTML5 player? The most upper part of the player, the high-level part of your player, is the user-facing part, and that's what we're going to call our user interface. And that's made up of the skin of your player, which is the design of the player itself. To that, we can add on any sort of business logic features, such as payment, authentication, any sort of ads. And then finally, in that layer, we have any sort of custom user interface features that go around the player, such as like playlists and social sharing, et cetera. We then move on to the quote-unquote meat of the video player, your media engine. There we go. So this is going to handle all of your playback logic, such as your manifest parsing, retrieval of video segments, and all of your adaptive bitrate rules. So it's no accident that we chose the meat of the burger for this part, because it's probably the most important part of your player. And you know, it's important not to ignore this part, because if your media engine is not very good, your entire player is going to be subpar. And you know, you can put whatever on top of it to mask that, but you're not going to be able to really mask that. So it's often a neglected part of the video player, but it's one of the most important. And then finally, on the bottom layer, we have everything that takes care of decrypting, decoding, and rendering the segments on the screen. So we have the DRM manager, the content decryption module that's actually baked into the browser, and then the decoder and the render. So let's take a look at those in a little bit more detail. First, we have the user interface, obviously, which is everything that you can customize with your brand's identity. First, we have the skin, which can include, obviously, a control bar, buttons, animations, any sort of icons, et cetera. And then next, we have all of our UI logic, the features defining the interaction with the video player on top of just simply playback. And so we have, you know, these can include playlist bar, thumbnails, channel selection, social sharing, et cetera. And the nice thing about a lot of these, if you're using a solution like Video.js, for example, a lot of these exist already as plugins that you can add to your UI core. And so if you take a look at the example of Video.js, they have an enormous list of all of these different plugins that you can have on your player. And so we took the example of the Eurosport player, which actually has something very cool. A kind of switch back to live where you can actually watch the live stream at the same time as you're doing a catch-up and kind of very easily switch between the two of them. And what's nice in HTML5, which is a kind of a big difference with Flash, this is something very easy to do with just a few lines of code and your media engine. And so you can have several instances of the player and have two different videos actually within the same player very, very easily. So the third component of the user interface is what we like to call your business logic. And this includes anything like, as I said, authentication, payment, any type of ad service that you might be using. In addition to these three, perhaps the most important one on this is actually what we call your configuration logic. Because it's going to be very important for you to actually be able to detect your user's device and configure the user experience accordingly. And what's nice is with HTML5, you're generally going to be able to develop all of your UI features very simply in CSS and in JavaScript, and then be able to reuse them across all of your devices to have like a seamless user experience, even if what you have underneath, your media engine underneath, might differ from platform to platform. So that's one of the beauties of kind of being able to separate your actual playback logic and your UI logic in HTML5.